Hello and welcome to the Sawalha-Adderleys. If you haven't, do subscribe to the channel. It's just me and my dear wife, Nadia Sawalha, who are running this channel. We put out all sorts of content, entertainment, media reviews, TV reviews, film reviews, mental health content, but also we focus on the news with Coffee Moaning, a daily sort of news, not gathering, but kind of news digest, if you like. But we also pay particular and specific attention to the genocide in Gaza. So if you do fancy keeping up to date with an alternate take on the news that doesn't really toe the mainstream media party line, then do come here. We try to kind of throw a spotlight on things that aren't being reported, and also we home in on the way in which stories are manipulated and the way in which the entire crisis has been couched in this spurious argument of Israeli self-defense. So with all that put to the side, I think this morning, today, we've bizarrely find ourselves in a situation where it's now become the new normal to wake up in the morning and accept headlines, and when I say headlines, I mean only headlines in a couple of the sort of mainstream, what would you say, sort of broadsheets, you know, not the tabloids. And we've just got used to the idea that basically the Israelis are shooting Palestinians at aid centres. The Associated Press today is reporting that at least 27 people have been killed at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food drop, or as we're calling them, the kill drop or the kill zone rather than a food zone. We've seen footage before of the conditions in which boxes are dropped. There's nothing orderly about it. There's no system. The Israeli forces on this occasion, this is I think the third or fourth morning now where the same reports of a couple of dozen Palestinians at least have been shot. The IDF, the Israeli authorities have tried to suggest it was agitators and looters and potentially Hamas militants that were shooting their own. My line on that is, unless you allow independent humanitarian aid agencies to give the aid, or unless you allow independent journalists that aren't embedded with the IDF to report in an unfettered fashion, you're not allowed to use that excuse anymore. It's not an excuse that's allowed. It's not an excuse that gets past the Geneva Convention, and it's not an excuse that's shrouded in legitimacy anymore. You can't just say it's them. You need to let us tell you and assess it for ourselves. So 27 have died again today. You know, the boxes are dropped, the people rush in, and unsurprisingly today, the Israeli Defense Forces have admitted that, yes, they fired into a crowd. Why? Because individuals within the crowd were moving out of the designated zone. So perhaps we're reaching beyond the hemmed, penned-inness of things. Why? Could any of it be to do with sheer panic and an absolute sense of desperation? The silence that's coming from David Lammy and Keir Starmer. Do you remember how Lammy stood up in the House of Commons only, 2 weeks ago? Calling them repulsive and atrocious and monstrous. And it's literally like tumbleweeds are flying by ever since. Not heard a peep. So we have got now the new norm. Every morning we wake up and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or the Gaza Humanitarian Front as we call it, every time they go to get their aid, a couple of dozen of them get shot. This seems to be the new normal. This is the new normal. You wake up. Now it's become just normal. You just see it reported and still no comment. In other news, I want to talk about Matthew Miller. Do you remember Matthew Miller? Oh my God. A more supercilious, arrogant, dismissive, sneery, snidey, I think I've said superior, sort of quite unforgivably dismissive, sort of suited exec representative of the Biden administration. Do you remember the number of times in press briefings he would just sneer at and dismiss and just mock the probing, necessary questions of then a sort of a cross-section of the world's press seeking clarity on the breaches of humanitarian law that were ongoing by Israel. He would stand there and he would diminish and he would belittle and he would be sarcastic and he would sneer. And just to remind ourselves, let's have a look at this clip, which is one of I think an Irish reporter asking the question. Just look at how he deals with it.
How should it come that UN, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, International Criminal Court can all find compelling evidence of war crimes by Israel, and the United States, with its enormous powers of intelligence and direct contact with Israel. Can't find those things.
I would say that different organizations have different burdens, different responsibilities, and we take ours very seriously and are taking these assessments very seriously and want to finish them as soon as possible, but it's important that we get them right.
That's one of his nicer put-downs. I mean, more often than not, he would suggest that there was an agenda to the questions. He would infer that you can't, you can trust Israel, but you can't trust anyone else statistics. He was absolutely probably the figurehead, the face of Biden's genocidal, excusing, justifying, funding, and perpetuating administration. He was an unforgivable specimen of genocide enabling. And oh my God, look what's happened. Even Matthew Miller smells something or senses something. Piers Morgan has moved into a different kind of part of the playing field. Now we all have to be so grateful. And I was saying to Nadia yesterday, isn't it interesting how the Piers Morgan thing, everyone's grateful, and there has been a complete gear change, and people have suddenly gone, oh well, if Piers says it, it must be true. But here's the thing about Piers that really fucks me off good and proper. It's like he's even trying to suggest that it took him a while to get there. He needed time to get there. We all saw this on October the 8th. We've seen this ongoing prior to October the 7th. We knew what Netanyahu was about. We knew what the settlers were about. We've seen the settlers settling and settling and settling for years and years and years. None of it was new. We knew that there was a moment's respite where Israel had the right to some form of response or self-defense. But we also knew by the end of October the 9th that that form of self-defense would spill dangerously into a mowing of the lawn of Gaza, unlike any other we've ever seen. So, you know what? There's no virtue, Piers Morgan, for taking your time to get round to this point of view, to get into the point of thinking, oh, you know what? This is a genocide now. I think this is a genocide now. And as Piers has stepped out from the shadows, so many others are stepping out from the... Emily Thornberry in the Labour Party, she stepped out a little bit before Piers. Alastair Campbell, he's done the same thing. And now we have the genocide enabler-in-chief, the man who essentially did all of Israel's propagandizing for them by shielding them from any interrogative questions or analysis or challenges from anyone in the press pen. This guy has come out on Sky News and he said this.
Do you think what's going on in Gaza now is a genocide?
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
Oh, sorry. They have committed war crimes. So have you committed a war crime standing on the podium suggesting for months, years, that they weren't committing war crimes? Or that you can't be a judge of whether... How can you now judge that they've probably committed war crimes? I need a bit more flesh on the bones, Matthew.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government.
Oh, now you're not expressing your personal opinions. I find this a really difficult one to wrap my head around. When you see the glee and the relish with which he dismissed and put down journalists who ever sort of stepped away from the Israeli propaganda machine's kind of narrative of events, you don't represent. So this is clearly a man who's trying to step just a little bit away from the intensity and the total support and enabling and funding and arming of a genocide that Biden's administration engaged in. This is him now just trying to just slip a scintilla of distance between him and the policies of the Biden administration. So is the governmental position now one that could be challenged in an international court? Oh, no, of course not. Because America doesn't sign up to the International Criminal Court. Oh, God.
The United States government had not concluded they've committed war crimes, still have not concluded that.
But your personal view is they have.
And
they were while you were there.
But let me qualify that. There are two ways to think about the commission of war crimes. One is if the state has pursued a policy to deliberately committing war crimes or is acting reckless in a way that aids and abets war crimes. And that, I think, is an open question. I think what is almost certainly not an open question is that there have been individual incidents that have been war crimes.
What he's saying there is there's a difference between accidental war crimes, even if there are countless numerous accidental war crimes, one after the other, which in my book cumulatively equates to genocidal intent. So there are accidental war crimes, individual moments where international humanitarian law is breached and broken. And then there's war crimes that constitute a national or governmental approach or a policy, a foreign policy in the region. Well, hang on a minute. We've had about 1,000,001 representatives of Israel, the country, the government, the people, screaming and shouting and clamoring for the completion, the sterilization, the cleansing, and the removal of all Palestinians. We will take Gaza completely. I think it's a safe bet to say that in your own terms, even if you've got this kind of distinction between accidental, even if they're accidental, there are numerous accidental, which all of them accumulated make a policy.
In almost every major conflict, including conflicts prosecuted by democracies, you will see individual members of the militaries commit war crimes. And the way you judge a democracy is whether they hold those people accountable.
Yes, and Israel hasn't. And every time you held those press briefings, the journalists would come in and specifically ask you any update on the individual case of the poor girl who was shot 350 times in the car, of the aid workers that were blown up, en route to the food banks, of the countless journalists that were shot and killed, and the ambulances and the paramedics and the hospitals. Yeah, they were investigating them all, but we never got a result. So here's my theory on all of this. Because Israel simply won't... Israel has definitively committed a genocide, is committing a genocide, and has no argument, cannot keep saying because of Hamas militias being there and Hamas infrastructure being in every home in Gaza. You are not allowed to use that argument until you let the international press in. And the reason they won't let the international press in is because they're not going to. The day they will let all sorts of world press in is when the entirety of Gaza has been concreted over. Go and check out the documentary Tantura. Has been concreted over. The bones and dust and evidence of all of the deaths, the slaughter and the destruction is at least 6 to 10 feet underground. And there is not a scintilla or shred of evidence to be looked at, found or analysed. So I just find it really quite unedifying, the way in which more and more, and I know that everyone's sort of, there's two camps here. People are saying, well, it's really good. Okay, it's too little, too late. But at least they're coming over. At least they're moving over. At least they're recognising that, at least they're trying to scarper for cover. And I'm like, yeah, but the damage is all done. This genuinely is too little, too late. We have now the remaining population vulnerable, starving, being shot when they go and get aid, being penned into certain areas and parts of Gaza. The Israeli government's gone particularly quiet because they're just enacting a slow administrative strangulation of the Gazan people. And eventually we're going to be in a situation where quite literally there's something so sort of physically repulsive about the very details of this. They're literally going to be pushing the remainders of the Gazan population up against a chainmail fence with their faces pushed into Egypt, and they will put the onus on Egypt to open the fence. And when the fence opens, it will collapse and they'll all pour out the Gazans into a part of the Sinai desert. And then Israel has succeeded in occupying and taking over the Gaza Strip. So these genocide apologists all clamoring for cover. We see you, and we don't buy it.